And thank you for tuning in for the fifth and final conversation with practitioners about the What Works Clearinghouse Practice Guide on designing and delivering career pathways at community colleges. This Practitioners Perspective video series is designed to bring in practitioners from the field to discuss their on-the-ground experience in implementing the practice guide recommendations. My name is Sarah Costello from Abt Associates, and I'm the project director of the What Works Clearinghouse Post-Secondary Contract, which is funded by IES. Today, I am pleased to be joined by three expert practitioners. Darlene Miller is Executive Director for the National Council for Workforce Education. She previously served as President of Manchester Community College in New Hampshire, as Vice President of Workforce and Economic Development at Shoreline Community College, and as Executive Dean for Workforce Development at Green River Community College. She served as an expert panel member guiding the development of the practice guide and will be moderating today's conversation with our two guests. Ken Warden is the Dean of the College of Applied Science and Technology at the University of Arkansas, Fort Smith. And Nikisha Stepney is the Executive Director of Business Technology and Workforce Development at Waubonsee Community College in Illinois. Welcome, and thank you all for joining me today. Before I turn the conversation over to our guests, I want to briefly introduce Recommendation 5 and its evidence rating. The fifth recommendation in the practice guide is to develop and continuously leverage partnerships to prepare students and advance their labor market success. The benefits of investing in, building, and deepening employment-focused partnerships include improving the relevance and alignment of the curriculum to employer or industry needs, expanding the opportunities for students to engage meaningfully with employer partners through employer presentations, on-site visits, work-based learning opportunities, and career fairs, and increasing the potential for job placement and advancement. Ultimately, improving student labor market outcomes benefits students, employers, and colleges alike. The What Works Clearinghouse staff and expert panel assigned Recommendation 5 a moderate level of evidence, which means that there's some evidence meeting What Works Clearinghouse standards that the practices improve student outcomes, but there may be ambiguity about whether that improvement is the direct result of the practices, or there might be questions about whether the findings can be replicated with a diverse population of students. This rating was based on 11 studies of interventions that include employment-focused partnerships. 7 of these studies meet What Works Clearinghouse group design standards without reservations, and the other 4 studies meet the standards with reservations. For each recommendation, the practice guide provides detail about the recommended practice, including how the panel arrived at the level of evidence rating, guidance about how to carry out the recommendation, potential obstacles and solutions, and tools and resources to support carrying out the recommendation. Today, we will focus on the how-to section of the practice guide. The practice guide offers 5 steps on how to carry out Recommendation 5. The first how-to step is to identify ways to get employers strategically engaged in each aspect of planning and implementing career pathways. When employers and industry partners are continuously engaged in all aspects of career pathways design and implementation, students are better prepared when they take an exit along the career pathway for employment. Community colleges can engage employment-focused partners in a variety of ways and at various stages of career pathways planning and delivery, as well as when they're supporting students with job searches and placement. The second step is to conduct an inventory to identify current and potential employment-focused partnerships. Consider mapping out existing and potential employment-focused partnerships and identify opportunities to strengthen or deepen existing partnerships or to engage in new partnerships. The third how-to is to designate staff time and resources to build and sustain employment-focused partnerships. When considering the benefits of such partnerships, administrators should also consider how they will invest resources and allocate staff time to build and then maintain the partnerships. The next how-to is to collaborate with employers and industry partners to provide students hands-on learning opportunities that are relevant to occupations along their career pathway. This can be in the form of project-based learning, high-fidelity simulations, experiential field trips, internships, work-based learning opportunities, clinical placements, apprenticeships, or other learn and earn models. And finally, the panel suggests colleges should regularly review the employment-focused partnership inventory to assess whether or not the right partners are involved to help advance students' labor market outcomes. Part of this step is also monitoring the relationship with employers by setting up formal or informal mechanisms that allow employers the opportunity to provide feedback on the Pathways program and student hires, including the extent to which colleges are preparing workers with the right skills. Now that I've given you a quick overview of the 5 steps on how to implement Recommendation 5, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Darlene, who will moderate a conversation with Ken and Nikisha on how they have approached fostering strong employment-focused partnerships.
So Sarah, thanks so much for that overview, and thanks for inviting us. I'm excited to be here with Ken and Nikisha. We've done this a couple of times and some NCW webinars, so I'm glad to be doing it with them again. So let's start with, sort of a first sort of thought. Nikisha, can you give us some examples, how you've been strategically engaging with employers? How do you incorporate the feedback that you get from the employers into the program? And have you been working with employers to provide some sort of hands-on opportunities and experiences for students?
Thanks so much, Darlene. Absolutely. Employer engagement for us, one of the first places we begin is through our advisory committee. We want to make sure that we ensure that we provide them information about our programs, but that we also take their feedback. We collaboratively share data with them so that they know exactly where our students are. This also includes periodic tours of our facilities. When we're not able to provide those tours, we certainly do provide virtual tours, a list of tools and equipment and resources to the employers. We also make sure to record their feedback and take action on it. And the important piece of that is ensuring that you circle back with them to tell them what actions you have taken to improve the program. We follow up to ensure that each one of them knows what recommendations we've taken under advisement. In addition to that, we utilize their resources, their time and expertise to inform and evaluate our program for any initial accreditation or reaccreditation efforts that we have throughout the division. We provide them opportunities for on-campus recruiting, which puts them before the students that we are working to train. And a perfect example of that is our Mopar Cap local program. We work specifically with dealers within our area, and one dealer in particular has taken on more than 10 of our students into full-time employment. So we consider that a success. But rather than leaving it there, we also go back to that employer and just continue to reassess. It's important to continue to keep that continuous feedback loop.
And Ken, what about you? How are you strategically engaging?
Well, I would agree with Nikisha on the employer engagement through advisory committees. That's a good place to start. And, I think that employment opportunities are really low-hanging fruit. So if you have, especially in today's environment, everyone's looking for skilled technical employees. And so if they have these needs and you are provide them time in the classroom setting to come to your campus, one, it ingratiates them to your campus. They learn about your facilities, but also they see your students. And that's where the magic happens, engaging those employers with your students and letting their employer come to the classroom rather than just posting something on the job board or having a flyer or sending an email to your students. When your employer comes and talks about the relevance of the academic program they're in and how that works to their company, it does two things. It excites the students about hearing someone who's signing the paycheck at the end of the day, but also it lets the employer see your students and what's going on in your programs. Also, workplace learning opportunities that we've discussed. We have a pilot project that we started 3 years ago with a local motor manufacturer, ABB, and they're a great partner of ours. And we developed this pilot project into it's not a registered apprenticeship, but it's an ABB or local affiliate apprenticeship. So we engage students through the summertime and then about 12 to 15 hours a week outside of their academic program. And so since that time, we've been able to replicate that and across other industry partners. Well, we have 4 now that are hiring these interns, apprentices, if you will, while they're on campus, finishing their degrees. And it happens early in the academic program. It's not a capstone. It's not a final semester internship. So these students are growing and learning. It makes their learning more relevant to them. And it again, builds that connection, that organic connection back to the industry partners. So those are really, really good ways to do that. And others are finding problems that the companies have or your industry partners have and giving the students an opportunity to solve those. And lastly, I will say, one of the ways that we have really bridged the gap on employee interaction is through non-credit training. So we have a unit on campus that's under the same college that really goes out and crafts customized training solutions for industries for their incumbent workers. And so if they know you have the expertise and you're crafting these training solutions for their incumbent workers, they're going to look to the graduates who already have these things that are coming to the academic program and they're not into the workforce yet. And so we really that incumbent worker thing is a way. It's customized training. It's really a way to make an early connection if you don't already have that connection made.
So I want to ask you a little bit off script, and hope I don't take the two of you off surprise by asking you this, but were there things that you did differently this year with the pandemic to engage with those employers?
Absolutely. As I mentioned before, we actually during the pandemic launched our reimagination of our Plano campus into our Innovation and Design Center right in the middle of the pandemic. And so how did we try to still make those connections with employers, invite them out where appropriate for small group tours so that they can see the facility? We communicated regularly with them through email communication. I went out to campus and recorded several virtual tours that we could upload, not only to be used to communicate with the employers, but also as an entree into what we were actually going to be offering at that campus. So that's one way that we were able to still maintain those connections. And as soon as it was possible for us to have some of those small group tours, we invited them onto campus so that we can continue to make those connections. And we hope that as we continue to open up, that we'll have the opportunity to fully engage with them and invite more of them out to engage with our newest facility.
Yeah, and I could add a couple concrete examples that we really had to engage is that we had our apprentice group. We had 3 different companies at that time. Now we're up to 4, but we were doing non-credit industry credential search through this process outside of the classroom because you've got such a tight curriculum and so many things to cover. So we were doing OSHA 10, and we do where all of our apprentices after year 1, they're lean yellow belt, lean Six Sigma yellow belt certified. So we pivoted the not the project component, but the live learning that we would have done in the classroom to a virtual environment. So that took a little extra work on behalf of our faculty members, but also on behalf of the students. And really, it was a little bumpy early on. But, you know, like in the last year, we've all kind of upskilled a little bit on this virtual thing. And so the students did that. And also the company interactions when we asked them to come together, because when you have 4 companies, they have different protocols and procedures about things as simple as logging on or clocking in or getting into the facility and how they engage with their timelines. So we moved a lot of those to different formats like WebEx or Teams or one of the others. So yes, there's been some very different twists and turns because of the COVID thing.
And if I may add, switching to these virtual platforms, also, I saw an increase. I don't know, Ken, if you could agree, in the amount of engagement. I don't know if logging on virtually and doing things virtually eliminate that barrier of time and commuting to a location, but we saw an increase in engagement with our employers when we switched over to a virtual environment. So that was a welcome surprise.
Okay. So let's shift a little bit. Sarah showed on her first slide or second slide the sample letter of employer engagement. And it goes through 5 levels of engagement: advising, capacity building, co-designing, convening, and leadership. Do you have employers across the the spectrum of those different parts of the ladder? And are you using them differently? And how are they working with you in sort of those different ways? So Ken, let me start with you on that one.
Okay. So, you know, on that end, there are different employers want to be engaged at different levels. So you kind of have to meet them where they are. And ask them, if you will ask them, they will tell you, but it's about having an open, organic conversation with them and see where they want to be. So one of the biggest things we do in our advisory committees, we want them to own the program. We want them, when they talk about I'm just going to use automation program at UA Fort Smith, we want them to talk about their program, you know, not just the program that they have over at the university. So you have to engage them. And so one of the things we do when we set our advisory committees up, we ask for the leadership structure at the advisory committee to be established and led by the industry partners, not a sit and get from us talking about those things. And so that's very structured. We have across all of our committees, all of our programs, we have a few things that we know we've got to talk about in order to get the job done. It's a guide for our industry partners to have a conversation. So what's your curriculum look like? Where are your gaps? What are your gaps in your labs? Are your textbooks antiquated? You need to be having those conversations. We dictate that we have at least twice a year. That's a minimum for us. But those conversations happen more informally outside of those. And it's best when they're led by the group of industry partners because they feel the buy-in. They own the program rather than you just sharing with them. And another thing I want to point out is, for our colleagues, I want them to understand, not all industry partners are great industry partners. There are industry partners who just, no matter what you do, you're not going to please them. And I'm going to give a quick example. When I first took the dean role, I was approached by someone who was a leader in the community in the automotive field. And they were just really critical about what we were doing and how we were doing. So I went to their place of business, met on their time, talked about all the things they wanted implemented, which most of which were what we were already doing. It's just that their perception was the reality. And so we went along and we talked about these things. I got engaged with their regional manager and their state level managers for this particular group, and got engaged with their service folks and their lead. And then we played phone tag, or really it was one-way communication because I never got a response. What had happened was the CEO level had a perception of what we were doing. That individual punted down to the frontline person, and there was zero follow-up. So after about the fourth time of getting no response, I said, you know what? I see where this is, and that's okay. We're not saying anything bad about the industry partner. We just know that they're not committed to investing, and that's okay too. If every industry partner is not a ringer, that's going to happen. And so you've got to know where you're investing those who want to invest in you, and have that mutual relationship for benefit.
So Nikisha, your sort of thoughts on this level of engagement?
Well, I think that in order to have that mutually beneficial relationship, it's important to share the division and institutional strategic plans and goals with those employers as well. And as Ken mentioned, to be okay with knowing that you have partners that you're working with across that continuum. There's still great value in working with employer partners if it's a working relationship. And then, of course, there's value if it's a strategic partnership, but they're fully integrated into your plans, into your program, and continuously partnering with you to help to provide opportunities for students. So it's great to have partners along that continuum. Of course, we would all love to have more strategic partners, but whether they're a working partner or strategic partner, it's important to share your vision with them and to know where they could fit in when the time is appropriate for them. In addition, we need to be flexible in considering how we communicate programming opportunities to them, ensure that we're speaking their language. I was speaking with an employer just the other day who is looking at possibly relocating to our area and wanted to know what workforce development supports were in the region. And in talking and doing a somewhat of a needs assessment with that employer, it's evident that he was not as concerned about whether or not this program was going to bear credit for those employees. He was specifically focused in on the competencies and skills that were going to be necessary to achieve their overall goal. So we have to be flexible when we consider bridging credit bearing and workforce education programming to ensure that we incorporate industry credentials and personalized learning options that meet the needs of employers. So we're asking them to meet us where we are, we're meeting them where they are, and we can definitely settle on some mutually beneficial strategies that we can employ.
So thank you. So in the recommendations, there's a how-to step. And actually, this is one of my how-to steps because this is one that's always been of importance to me, is around regularly reviewing who your employer partners are. Do you have the right partners at the table? What type of mechanisms or tools or processes are you using to sit and look at, okay, who do we have? Do we have what we need? What are we missing? Who should we go get to be one of our partners? So Nikisha, you want to start with that one?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the ways in which we ensure we know who to go get, who we should be talking to, is that we have representation on key local and regional groups and boards. For example, the Valley Industrial Association, We have various people in leadership, including myself, on chambers of commerce or integrated into the Economic Development Corporation within the region. So it's important to stay connected, not only looking at what's happening at the national level, but what's happening in your region and your neighborhoods with your employers. And not only focusing in on those larger employers within your region, but also those smaller mom and pop organizations. Sometimes they get overlooked when we're looking at these big data sets and we're trying to make decisions, but it's important to be boots on the ground with them as well. And then consider an internal advisory council of key stakeholders across your college or institution. For example, Waubonsie Community College has recently launched a core group that evaluates CT and workforce planning, strategy, and employer engagement. We call it the Waubonsie Workforce Solutions Council. It brings a cross-functional team from every functional area of the college to the table to evaluate, to talk. It's important to take that feedback. We all have key interactions that happen, and we always have to be mindful to be thinking, how could what this employer that I met, this person that I connected with at this networking event, connect to some strategy or goal that we have at the college? So by having a group like this, it allows us to be able to leverage all of our resources appropriately.
Yes.
So, hey, Ken, do you have any comments or anything you'd like to add what Nikisha just had to say about reviewing your partners and engaging with partners?
Sure. And I'd like to double down on what Nikisha said about having your folks on campus on board and knowing what those partnerships looks like. That's key. So you're not unintentionally walking on each other when you're engaging with industry partners. So keeping your internal communication clean and frequent is important. But you know that it's these relationships aren't a one and done. But I will say one thing I try to do is meet our partners where they are. So set a schedule and follow it. I try to go see 2 industry partners a month. Now that doesn't sound like much, but if you do that over a couple of years period of time, they're going to know that you're investing in them, and you really want to invest in them if you're going to expect them to invest in you. So I take someone with me. It might be our lead for our customized training. It might be one of my subject matter experts, because they can really shore up the gaps and carry the conversation where I can't. And sometimes I try to take the chancellor. So top level influence and interest in what they're doing. And that ensures that they know you're seeing what they do. You're trying to parlay that back to what you've got going on in the classroom, in the lab. And so that can really help make a difference in knowing that you're meeting them on their turf and knowing what they're doing, and that it's important to you. Also, I'm sure most of our states, I know Arkansas does, I'm sure most of yours do, have strategic strategies and targets on companies and industry sectors. Knowing what those are, working with your local chambers of commerce so that you have involved with like requests for proposals, or when companies are coming to town or looking at to locate a business in your area, you know, helping make sure the chamber or whoever the recruitment party is for site location knows what your set of assets are and how that parlays to a company. And then that'll many times will give you a chance to have a first impression before they ever come to your community. So you set that, you set that first impression very strong and very positive on your campus, and how you want to be responsive to them, maybe even before they even get to your community. And so, and if someone shows up out of the blue or there's no RFP process, when a new company comes to town, go see them immediately. There's no second opportunity to set that first impression. So I think that's a big deal. And then as far as sustained systematic consistency, I would say at the macro level, be consistent in what you do. And we review that with our lead faculty members and our list annually. And we look at, okay, who's fallen off our committees across all of our programmatic committees. And then who do we need to shore up that gap? And I would say you want people of influence. I don't necessarily mean money, which that's not a bad thing. If you've got a philanthropic company or a good civic, company that likes to give to the university, that's great. But you want people that can influence the engagement or other opportunities. Maybe it's internship opportunities. Maybe it's equipment. It could be money to your program. But look for folks that can influence the process to help get them engaged and ingratiated. You want those key influencers engaged. And then you have, aside from those 2 established meetings that make it systematic and sustained, you have these other visits to them and more informal opportunities where you build the relationship, because the relationship is what it's all about. It's them trusting you, you trusting them talking about having an ownership in their program, and them telling your story. If they're telling your story at their kitchen table, that's what's going on. So you don't have all the marketing, all the ads, all the posts you can put out there. In my opinion, don't make up the gap for other people telling your story at their kitchen table to their family members, to their kids, So I think that's important.
Ken, you just hit on something that I found was one of the most useful things when I was doing that work, is that when I needed new partners, I looked to my current partners to say, who do you recommend? Who do you suggest? And I would use my current partners when I had the conversation with the new folks to help set the table of what the expectations were, how we wanted to engage with them. And I also let my current partners tell the story of the college. I never told the story of the college. I let the employers tell their peers the story, because I felt like the employers got it better when they were hearing it from their peers.
That's right.
So the last question I have for both of you is, based on your experience, both of you as being deans, and based on this recommendation, what's the most important tip or the most important takeaway that you want to share with other CTE deans and colleagues out there? Ken, do you want to start?
Sure. I would say the most important thing is make time to do it. There's never enough time. It's very easy to sit behind our computer screens and get bound up in the administrivia and the email of higher education. And I'm, tongue in cheek. It's not trivial. It's important things that we do to organize our programs in our colleges. But if you want your programs to be as effectual and to be as recognized, you have to get the employers engaged and let them help tell your story. Organize it at the macro level. Let your subject matter experts and folks help you with the details of the programmatics. Be persistent and systematic in how you do it. Share the vision of your university and engage with them for innovation. And then don't miss the forest for the trees. You can get bound up in those details, shore up those relationships, and engage those industry partners with those students, and the magic will happen.
Nikisha?
Yes, agreed. I would say relationships. It is important to see the work that you do inclusive of employer partners at all times. When you're thinking of launching a program, when you're reviewing a program, when you're looking at process, you have to keep them in the forefront because they are part of the piece of this puzzle that makes this all successful and work. And then work collaboratively with key stakeholders across your institution, because much of this work is a collective effort. You can't stand alone. You will need the support of those individuals to make known the opportunities that exist at your college.
So thank you both so much. I always enjoy doing this work with both of you. You're my top star CTE deans out there, and I really appreciate you doing this. And I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah to close off the session. So thanks all.
Thanks, Darlene, Ken, and Nikisha, for sharing so much of your experience related to engaging employers in partnership. It was really great to hear your specific recommendations, suggestions, your lived experience. I really appreciated your off-script question, Darlene, about adapting during COVID, because that's the reality we are all living in right now. The Designing and Delivering Career Pathways at Community Colleges Practice Guide can be accessed from the Whatworks Clearinghouse website. And in addition to the practice guide, the website includes a recording of the live webinar launch where we introduced the practice guide, Darlene and the other panel experts, and then also the 5 recordings from the Practitioner's Perspective video series. To our audience, if you have any additional questions for our guests, feel free to connect with Darlene via email. Her email address is displayed on the slide here. And to wrap up the Practitioner's Perspective video series, I want to thank everyone for tuning into this video. Once again, extend my gratitude to Darlene, Ken, and Nikisha for joining us today. I also want to thank the other guests from our prior videos. We really hope that folks will extend the conversations from these videos in their own work with community colleges. So thank you all and take care.